The Sage Barista Express Impress is one of those machines that often sits at home because it's relatively affordable. It combines an espresso machine and a grinder, and because it offers that it makes coffee easier with it, kind of like a hug between a fully automatic machine and a portafilter. Question mark. And is it actually good? Does it do what it promises? Topics we should definitely look at in this video. We are back here in our test studio, and we have with us the Sage Barista Express Impress machine. A coffee machine that combines the grinder and espresso machine and actually wants to make an offer. An offer that says making espresso doesn't have to be merely a hobby. You can use a variety of techniques to really make it much easier and more accessible. And that's the idea. And we could now go ahead and say, we'll test the machine, and we use the same criteria for testing a 3,000 or 5,000 Swiss franc machine, like we always do. We will of course do that on one hand and at the same time put everything into context, including the price range, and try to make it understandable for you what you need to achieve, so that you might still make good coffee with one or the other thing that doesn't work so well, Michel. That's our topic, our core idea, our mission. Michel, I mentioned espresso machine, portafilter on one hand, and also a somewhat simplified preparation mechanics behind it. Could you explain a little bit more and provide some context? So what kind of machine is this exactly, and how does this principle really work? What's with this handle here?
This isn't a steam wand, it's on my side of things.
Yes.
The fundamental idea behind it is simply to show you the difficulties and perhaps also a bit of the unavoidable mess in the theory of tempering, grinding, as well as other related processes that can become quite messy. Coffee, crumbs left and right of the portafilter to make it a bit easier. And due to this feature, the machine comes with an integrated tamper, meaning we grind the coffee into the portafilter and tamp it down in the same process. Outside the brewing chamber, but integrated into the machine. We'll go over it later, rinse the brew group, and start brewing. So this entire process is actually already predetermined by various checkpoints, and this is definitely going to make your life much easier. Additionally, the machine itself is capable of recognizing how much coffee is in your filter and also gives you a signal indicating whether it is good or not in theory.
And otherwise it's another Sage Barista Express. You can already see the typical Sage cone. But you can also see it's basically a similar machine. The thermocoil or the thermoblock inside is actually quite similar as well. It is certainly not the thermojet we have in the Sage Barista Pro. This also means a noticeably longer heat-up time. Let's get right to it then. Just briefly, we'll dive into it in more detail later, but you're actually saying it quite accurately. In the machine itself, tamping is done. Yes, actually, when we're making coffee here, we hardly come into contact with the ground coffee powder at all. This comes out relatively structured and relatively flat once the whole mechanism is done with grinding, with then tempering and all those steps that follow sequentially in the process. So this part actually falls away. The machine wants to make us this specific offer right here and now. That's why I said at the beginning, like halfway or 2/3 of the way between portafilter, espresso machine, and a fully automatic coffee machine and its related equipment. The machine wants to make the offer. I'll organize that for you. Of course, one of the central questions is, does it work? So, does this really work as well as you could possibly do it? Does it work as poorly as it does in the fully automatic machines? We should take a look at that.
Right, we definitely need to look into that. And at first, we can take an outside perspective on the machine. You have different color versions, so 2 for this model. One is in brushed stainless steel with a sleek silver finish, and the other is in this elegant black as seen right here. You have the typical Sage bean container with around 250 grams capacity with a convenient turn switch to securely close it. You have the adjustable burr in the grinder. So if you have a coffee where the range isn't quite right, you can easily adjust it to get the optimal grind size.
Very briefly, the grind adjustment is external, yes.
Right.
If we want it finer or coarser, we can adjust it here like with all Sage grinders right inside the cone.
And so consequently, you have a noticeably greater range. Now here we were somewhere with our different coffees between just about 3 and 8-7.
At 9 now.
We're at 9 now with our Appas coffee. So from that angle, there's still enough range left. We could go finer, but you'd still have the option to expand if needed, offering more flexibility. And then we have the classic Sage water tank. It has a capacity of 2 liters. Exactly, you can pull it out like this. We would definitely recommend you, and this is included at the beginning of the delivery, at least the first set, the filter set.
That was all right too.
That was tested in the test. Absolutely. You can really use it by simply adding raw water, and it will then be filtered through this filter. About once a month, give or take, depending on your coffee needs, be sure to replace it as recommended. And we really don't have any issues here because we always make sure to brew with filtered water. And then what you get is a thermoblock, a thermoblock-like heating method. Thanks to this advanced system, Sage says, in around 40 seconds, the indicator light switches on. We can do that again, so it's been hot the whole time. You can turn it on again, and after 40 seconds, more or less, it stops blinking and is then theoretically hot.
Glad we're discussing this again, but let's stick to the exterior for a moment. How does it all feel?
The machine weighs 11 kilos, and due to these 11 kilos, when you do clamp it, it's just, yes, the plate here isn't fixed either, but even on the table, there's also, now I'll say, some movement happening.
So I definitely wouldn't really criticize that in the...
The entire machine picks all of that up. So that's exactly how it is, and it's okay, it's good, really.
Otherwise, almost no sharp edges worth mentioning positively.
When everything is plastic, it's difficult.
Not everywhere, actually. So we have surfaces here, of course, especially in the front area and the side panels. And yes, on the outside, it's really, I'd say, as nicely and expertly crafted as a good kitchen machine.
Solid and very reliable.
It fits well and is very well thought out. Truly a thoughtful and careful design. Well, this is also repeated with Sage, as we see time and again, and there isn't much to say about the external processing, in my opinion. It is very clean, perfectly tidy, and works really well. And actually, the target tray capacity,
about 1 liter,
is really decent. So just a reminder, Stone Espresso, 400 milliliters, it works well. It is relatively far pulled back, and I think you can tell a lot of it is really well thought out.
And the typical Sage box you're likely familiar with back here, there's still a bit of water remaining from the previous flushing. But inside, you can also place the cleaning disc in there, for example, for better results. So, we've carefully thought it through. A tag goes up saying, empty me, when it's full, and everything's perfectly fine.
Exactly. To briefly touch on it again, Michel, you said the grinder is integrated, right? It has an integrated grinder, like in other Sage Express and Barista models, ensuring a consistent grind quality. This is on your left side, and you'll find the portafilter on the right. You then move here, where the grinding takes place, and over there is where the brewing happens. As far as we can tell, the grinder is the same one that's always installed in all Sage models. That's essentially the Sage Smart Grinder.
Grinder Pro.
We've tested it thoroughly. You can find the detailed results online. It's a solid choice for an entry-level espresso grinder that we recommend. Let's take another quick look at it. But I would say that's the rough classification.
Sure.
Maybe just a quick heads up. Michael mentioned a grind size. Sometimes we do it, but not always. It's always somewhat risky since that's our grind size. We made a video about it once called My Grind Size is Not Your Grind Size. We'll link it. At the same time you mentioned, you can adjust the inner base container finer or coarser. We keep hearing that, especially with the coffee machines from Sage. I can't make it fine enough, or it's not coarse enough. Then you can simply just adjust it. We've made a video about that. We will link it.
Then there's the drip tray. There's the 54mm portafilter. You might know this from larger machines' FAMA groups, which are often 58mm. Only Sage portafilters fit properly due to the smaller diameter, effectively blocking non-Sage brands. This ensures optimal performance and allows your Sage machine to work seamlessly. It also has this 3-point suspension system where the portafilter nicely fits in. Because of this feature, if you want to try something different here, you'd really need a Sage-specific portafilter that would fit.
This has naturally challenged us with our temperature measurements, which we will get to in a moment, because we measured this machine just like all the others, and that is partly a challenge for us when manufacturers so completely have entirely different sizes, diameters, and so on, because our classic measuring instruments just don't work effectively. But indeed, we actually made a custom portafilter for this particular model. It works well, and we can therefore provide you with temperature curves, clean, precise temperature curves, and we will do that in the course of this video. Michel, before we dive into the individual areas a bit more, I want to emphasize once again, of course, we also bought the machine. Of course, like all other machines, we tell you straight up what we think without any sugarcoating.
Absolutely. Want more measurements?
Yeah, the measurements are usually quite similar. You likely still recall that from about 3 years ago.
No. I had to double check once more to be absolutely certain that everything was correct. We have a height of 42 centimeters, a depth of 32 centimeters, and a width of 30.5 centimeters, all measured quite precisely and accurately. With the rotating wheel and the tamping lever, we are now another 5 centimeters wider, and the total weight comes to approximately 11 kilograms overall. 250 grams bean container, filling capacity.
So far, so good, Michel. This is it. The Sage Barista Express Impress video done.
All right, let's head back home. No.
We have a bit to discuss. We need to find a middle ground today between the grinder test and the espresso machine test. We've already tested the mill, so we won't go into much detail, but we can touch on a few more references there. Otherwise, of course, we'll be making espresso. We will be making cappuccino, Michel. But before we can fully move in that direction, I would like to talk to you about the heating time first. I associate a thermoblock with quick heating. I think this, especially because I know the Sage Barista Pro and Sage Bambino, which both don't have a thermoblock, but having a thick film heater really has a very quick heat up time. We have, of course, already done temperature curves there, and we can now also detect a few changes here. How long is the preheating time?
Yeah, that's quite not so simple to say. You really have to just state it directly and clearly to understand. So we measured a lot of different things because, and Benjamin mentioned it correctly earlier, it's not solely about telling you what's bad or wrong with the situation or measurement. That's a part of it.
So we will, of course, say exactly that.
But it's also about solving it well, ensuring it works perfectly. The really nice thing about this device is that it invites you to simplify the entire brewing process at home, making it both more enjoyable and efficient. And that's the goal, that with the device you can enjoy a solid coffee as well as a solid espresso and cappuccino.
Simplicity doesn't always taste better, but let's go back to the heating time.
Absolutely. The initial measurement we took is typical for a thermoblock system. After 5 minutes, we want to check where it stands. After about 40 seconds, it clearly shows that. You are nowhere near the realm of common sense after even 40 seconds. The touch temperature is a scorching 90 degrees.
No, you're not. And maybe also in the past, Sage made it like this. They just sped over it. They simply said, come on, let's blast as much heat as we can with the first drops, not only to warm the coffee, but also to thoroughly heat up the portafilter for the perfect brewing temperature. What we strongly criticized in the video, which I will also link for you, but they are not doing that now, quite the contrary.
It's not merely a heater anymore. This is another...
Wasn't it the same with the Express?
It wasn't on the Express either, right? Then it's the Touch and the Pro and wherever else it goes. The 5-minute measurement was too low. You don't hit 90 degrees on the first brew, so adjust the temperature settings next time. We always integrate a flush shot there. This means we flush the portafilter for 20 seconds with hot water because the portafilter itself, let me say, it's now hot after she was already hot before, and now we've turned her on again, and now he's getting the temperature, and that's just great. But after 5 minutes, it's not hot. That's perfectly normal, and we take that into account. With the first brew, you're at 83 or 84 degrees after 5 minutes, then you slowly climb. This temperature rise is normal and part of the process, so no need to worry. It just takes time. That means you need, at the absolute minimum, 3 brewings. Until you get into that range above 90 degrees, I would rather say 4 brewings to get into the range above 92 or in the 92 area. Where we actually settle down, it will really thrive and taste delicious.
Are you holding steady?
No, not at all, really, no.
No one pours 3 or 4 espressos until they reach the right temperature to brew a good one. Then just wait a bit longer.
I'll make the first for you, the second for you, the third for you, and the fourth I'll drink myself.
Exactly. That's how it was yesterday when I walked into the test room. Yes. And I enjoyed the first espresso. And in this case, it was not only too cold, but it was also a completely wrong ratio. This was a very bad espresso experience. Nothing you would recommend to drink.
And it was not even intended.
You could say that. But we could also just wait longer. If we would wait longer now, how long would we wait to actually get the first or second shot? Something like that. As common sense would suggest in situations like these.
Exactly. That becomes somewhat difficult because for us, the mere thought of having to wait somewhere for 25 whole minutes with a thermal block is almost entirely pointless and frankly quite frustrating because that...
Thermal block. You're used to that from other machines.
Not from the thermoblock.
No, but that's just a thermal block that takes a little longer.
The readings, the next measurements were conducted at 10 minutes and at 15 minutes. And the number of brews you need to make until it gets tasty just keeps getting a little shorter each time. And that means after 10 minutes, it definitely needs 2 brews that aren't good. The third one is then right on the edge. And after 15 minutes, it is then like, we're almost there. So ordinarily, I would recommend that in this machine, if you do the classic preheating, we also have a hack coming up later on, how to do it faster. I would wait 25 whole minutes.
25 minutes are allocated for the Sage Barista Express Impress. That is absolutely not impressive. That is a very, very long heating time. Honestly, it's the slowest heating time we've ever measured in a thermoblock. Several thermoblocks never reach temperature and are still measuring. But at least it will eventually reach the right temperature mix, yes.
And the problem with that is really, she climbs up. The first exams are then too low, and then you're there, and then it just keeps going up. In the end, we check with 96 degrees and more, but that's another topic. In my opinion, it's easier if you use a darker coffee variety, which handles temperature fluctuations better. This simplifies brewing and ensures consistency, leading to a great cup of coffee each and every time you brew. Nevertheless, please give the machine a good 10 minutes, a quarter of an hour, and heat up the portafilter once. Because what we could definitely say is that flushing directly before attaching the filter to the group, the more water runs through, the hotter it gets.
And again, we're discussing the highest temperature setting, which we set up for this experiment.
Okay.
It's possible we can adjust the temperature.
And now, here's a really cool hack. Because Thomas loves experimenting and finding ways to make things go much faster. And he simply mentioned that as of now, we already have the knowledge from an array of different brewing groups, whether they are similar or perhaps different brewing groups, the particular system where we initially pump in a significant amount of energy to get things started. So we intentionally overheat by going into the steam mode and then bring it down once more before we brew the mixture. Just like this.
Does that work with the Sage Barista Express Impress as well?
That's both a definitive yes and a no. Yes, it absolutely works. And what's really exciting for all of us is that the machine becomes significantly much more precise in the shots. So the consistency of the brews during the overall brewing time is higher if you do that, if you rely on this fast heat up on the device, and you also get to a useful point much faster. I'd say you can brew after 5 minutes. That should be the goal. And it actually works in a rather quite straightforward and simple manner. Yeah, you can discuss it in any way you want. I personally think it is...
Just show it first. Just show it first. The criticism will come later.
It's a walkable path. So the machine is now operational, and we assume the machine was off overnight, right? You switch it on, and then it starts blinking first until it gets fully heated up. As long as it's blinking now, it's hot, of course. You can't activate the steam mode. When it blinks, you can turn on the steam mode, and then you'll get a little jug included in the delivery. Take the steam wand out like this, and turn on the steam. For sure, about 1.5 to 2 minutes. So with 2 minutes, you're definitely safe. So let's stop the time. And then some hot water comes first. That's normal with the thermovlog.
Michel, can I quickly add something to that? Yes, there's a bit of time for that. So, for everyone who doesn't watch our videos every single day and isn't entirely familiar with the whole topic, or if you're considering buying your very first espresso machine, fast heat up and steam boiler means we actually need significantly higher temperatures for steaming milk than when we are brewing coffee, which is quite interesting. That means in a model that consists only of a heating element, this heating element must be heated to a higher temperature for frothing milk. And we can use that to bring the entire thermodynamics, including the whole device, to higher temperatures. Beyond the boiling point, we aim for 120 degrees in a boiler to ensure optimal performance and stability across the operation. When we want to brew, we will only brew at 3 to 94 degrees, and we take advantage of this by sending a lot more energy into this thermoblock to push it beyond the point, and overall we achieve much better thermal stability and efficiency, which is crucial. The whole thing is, of course, I mean, are you seriously recommending that when I use the espresso machine? Turn it on. Should I first go ahead and try to humidify the air or what?
Yes. So now you have the very first shot already.
At the latest, the second.
Top after 3 minutes.
So you've already come up with quite a lot of interesting hacks today.
Yeah.
This is definitely one of those situations where I would have to say that it's really more of a joke than anything else.
Well, that's a perfect solution. Oh, I see. The entire 2 minutes are nearly over now. And make sure you definitely do not put it in the drip tray. So now we've got some more moisture back down below once again.
I think it's actually quite good. You're totally on that trip. You really want to, get things faster. Enable a good espresso. Quality is really key. And ideally, you shouldn't have to wait too long for your very first coffee. Exactly. That's the approach you should take. How absolutely awful it looks and so on doesn't really matter for the moment. In that sense, I find that if you argue it that way, then definitely it makes sense. On the other hand, I'd like to ask you all, do you think it's a viable path to take? I mean, it really looked like 3 minutes of just cooking noodles or perhaps really doing everything all at once, all together.
So what we have here is probably around 40 milliliters of hot water, if it even reaches that amount. And it really needs, as we can openly reveal, just a tiny bit of electricity, like when you heat something up for 15 minutes.
That's definitely true, of course. But even with that being said, still, I mean, if someone asked, what's your machine doing there? Yeah, I turn it on. So imagine that you had to preheat the lawnmower for a full 2 minutes first.
I don't have any lawn left anymore. However, what I really don't like is this particular thing. We just tested it out in the drip pan. And what happened then was that there was a lot of steam and moisture around the entire mill. Moisture in the mill where we grind, tamp, and do everything else that needs to be done. I find that a bit difficult, hence to the convention. And I didn't really think that way. It's really about postponing this entire topic for now. You see what it does. It doesn't really matter in the end. To wrap up, follow these steps. Heat for 40 seconds, steam for 1.5 to 2 minutes, then preheat the portafilter for 20 seconds. This ensures optimal performance. Then you can. Clearly see the first shot is already really good, and the second is genuinely right on point, fitting perfectly. And I told you beforehand, yes and no. Because the machine does something that is actually useful in everyday life, namely it cools the thermoblock down relatively quickly after steaming. So even if we brew immediately, we're not at 100 degrees, which would make sense, but it's not what we want here for optimal flavor extraction and quality. Let the steam run a bit longer. Now I can flush the portafilter for around 20 seconds, and then the very first shot will be absolutely delicious.
So this is how I see it. Maybe you've already bought the machine, and now you want to make a fantastic espresso in about 5 minutes without any complications. I think that's a great offer for everyone who has the machine. And the machine is quite common. I have to say though, it's a bit of a preview of the conclusion. If I'm deciding to make coffee in 5 minutes, I won't buy something so complex like this with a 2-minute steamy adventure here, but rather an espresso machine that warms up in 5 minutes.
All right, yes, so
we have a solution. Okay, but now about more hacks and solutions. For this machine, we have come up with a few additional solutions. If you're interested, we are currently working on a small course specifically for this machine outside of our YouTube format because it is so prominent on the market. You can simply book it. It's not completed yet, but if you're interested, we guide you every step of the way on how to make good coffee with the Sage Barista Express. Despite all challenges, you see we discussed one here, then follow us or click on the link and you can already sign up right now for the comprehensive e-learning course. We're warm. Should we make espresso before the machine cools down?
That's the beauty of it. That just doesn't happen.
Now we're here. Now we're here permanently. That means we can still talk around a bit.
We can chat a bit more, but once the machine gets hot, it's truly hot and ready to go. And we have to take in mind that this is a new machine more or less 700 Swiss francs. We can add that to the list, about 700 francs or 700 euros. Yes, this thing costs. Exactly. We also made a WBC protocol there. The WBC protocol is actually for gastro machines, so really high performance machines, sometimes with only 40 seconds of pause until the next brewing. So from brew to brew. It's not specifically designed for that purpose. It'll naturally get too hot. But even with that challenge,
we find 100 franc machines perform very well there.
Yeah, as long as brewing frequency isn't too high, it generally handles stress quite well. When it starts getting hot though, its efficiency can decrease. Exactly, when it's hot, it's hot. Let's move on to the front section a bit before we brew espresso. You have a power button that's clear. You also have a volumetric setting that is pretty much almost constant. That's kind of the problem. Also, the more resistance we generate, the more inconsistent it becomes. That's such a typical problem. Manometer. Personally, I'm not a fan of manometers on machines because they often suggest something that's not true at all. Like boiler machines. It shows it's hot. The machine is not hot. That's why I always see it mainly as decoration. Here too, it's really just decoration and nothing more. You are automatically in this gray area with a classic brewing recipe. If it's not, but still the coffee tastes good, who cares? Then we'll definitely get to discussing this whole malt and dosage topic in just a little while. And also a malt button is there. It clearly indicates when it needs proper cleaning. And exactly.
Of course, I really like that. A button like that, I want to be cleaned. That's a nice feature.
It has a cleaning program, a nice feature for 700 francs. Yes, it's a very nice feature.
So I see you're actually a fan?
No, well, maybe yes.
Make coffee?
I believe you can make really good coffee with it, and that's pretty cool.
Michel, after yesterday's experience, things can only get better. I'd say, let's go for an espresso.
First, release the portafilter, clean it thoroughly, especially make sure it's dry. And then we have the grinder here. We can go in once, really like this. It pulls it in automatically. The positioning of the portafilter is relatively simple. He is securely fixed there. And then we simply press the button here.
How's the grinding time?
10 seconds.
Good.
The machine indicates to me that I need to temper now, and then I press it down one time, and then I get the signal for how much is in there. And now I adjusted the grind a bit coarser beforehand, and now you really see that the amount has now been displayed here at the top. This amount right here is really just too much for anyone to handle. So if you're above this line, you're definitely too high and should make an adjustment accordingly. In this particular case, you can clearly see that there is just too much coffee.
Yeah.
Way too much coffee in it. And now you would make some adjustments. At the moment, I'm in manual programming mode, which means I could now turn the dial slightly and reduce it. But I can also switch to automatic mode. Then the machine learns by itself how much dosage it needs. I'll explain that to you in more detail later. And for now, just reduce the amount a little. Let's play this game once more. Insert the portafilter and grind. So, and now you can see on the display, I'm currently at the smiley face. Yes, that's right, just minus. I have poured in enough coffee and can now start the brewing process as planned. Since we are generally a bit too cool with the brewing temperature, I really flush directly before we brew. Maybe just beyond the pre-infusion. Clamp it in, start the brewing software, and then begin the timing.
Can't you aim anymore, or?
Yeah, one of the targets seems just a bit off. In fact, it's mine.
Oh, that was good.
Did you manage to read that?
So many absolutely cool comments.
Mega geil.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone who took the time to comment on our previous video. That was the Stone machine. So that one wasn't the last video, but it was one of the very last videos we published. Stone espresso. What's the effect? Cappuccino effect.
A cappuccino effect, but simply the amount that leaves the spoon changes the acoustics. And you looked at me weird and said, that sounds exactly the same.
You've heard beeping all around the room today, haven't you?
Excellent. Thank you for the thorough and detailed explanation. Take a look at the comments. It was Recapstone explaining exactly why. The pitch gets higher when you tap the spoon for a longer period of time.
Still a bit too cold.
Just a touch deeper. Otherwise, it's quite remarkably marzipan-y.
You have now chosen a coffee that forgives a lot, making the brewing process notably easier and more enjoyable. Still.
Who can forgive a little? Yes. I wouldn't say, for example, I wouldn't come here with a super light fruity Geranos or Caesar, as they're too delicate for this machine. For that, this is the wrong machine. That needs to be said very clearly. But we have our Apas coffee here, our organic certified coffee from Brazil. And it does indeed forgive mistakes and errors. But the two of us just know it incredibly well, and we are aware that we could possibly get a bit more out of it than what we have in the cup at the moment.
Yes, and now we mainly have a bit of an acidic level. This comes from perhaps not having enough temperature. Is or was there? Michel, we've made 2 notes now. The first one ran noticeably slower. The second one was a bit quicker. We did 2 takes because we wanted to get a nice close-up for you. And I have a significant problem. Now I have a problem here. You see, I have a truly fantastic barista by my side who is particularly good at distributing ground coffee evenly and thoroughly. Wonderful straight alignment, so nicely polished and finished to perfection. You often see that on the machines. Not always, but more and more often. And he does that with the espresso as well. And then the surface on top of the portafilter looks wonderful. And then I get to truly experience what a skilled barista does, excellent puck preparation. The machine will handle that for us now. I'd like to quickly run through it with you. You stick it in there, and then you carefully draw it down, and then naturally, inside the entire container, in this entire collection chamber, there's a mound that forms. We just don't typically bother at all with spreading it out evenly. That's why I suggested once, with automatic or a fully automatic machine where it's the same, that we should shake the whole machine. I did it right here as well, just to ensure that this pile really spreads out completely before you actually pull it down. Because if you pull down and you are dealing with this really steep hill without any proper distribution, then you will always have a very high probability that you will let more water pass through at the edges than you would ideally want. There is less resistance here. In the middle, less water will flow. And then, because there is more activity at the beginning or at the edge, you have, well, partly also, extraction gives a sour taste, while over-extraction gives a bitter one. And then in the end, you just don't have a balanced cup.
Totally with you.
I praised you earlier, so now you can't say anything else.
Yeah.
Yes?
You always do that. Yes, in this specific case, the factor that's added actually extends it further. This mountain is definitely not like that. This mountain is like this. That means this mountain is very left-centered. The mill that's in our machine, how it grinds out in the espresso grind setting we're using, this mountain isn't as sharp, but instead on the side. That means when we tamp it together carefully later, we will extract much less from here than usual. So it runs through faster. And on the other side, we have higher resistance.
And the basic idea is, maybe again, we tamp, distribute the coffee grounds and so on, consistent resistance. To create uniform resistance, which actually ensures that the water runs evenly everywhere, extracting evenly everywhere, and thus also on such an evenly level, you could also say extracting 18 to 22% of your coffee. But here, some spots extracted 14% and others maybe 25%, since a lot flowed through. Yes, more noticeable with light roast.
Okay.
Still, we do have an espresso that is indeed drinkable. That's precisely why I always say it's good to use an espresso that is a bit more forgiving by nature. You made reference to a few of those bright and unique specialty coffee espressos earlier on today. If we were to brew with this now, it would just be undrinkable because the acidity would blow your hat off, which would be fine.
I would now see, I can see the dry spits, I see Mami, I see Apas, maybe I can still see Enrique. But then it really starts to get difficult. Additionally, in the mill, the ground material that comes out has a fluctuation of about plus or minus. Well, we say about 0.3 plus and minus, so it adds up to 0.6.
17.7, 18.3, that's the given range.
The extraction started at 26, now it's at 24, which of course supported the acid a bit more, but I honestly didn't change anything. And there was enough coffee extracted that the dead space wasn't an indicator for a different brewing. So that was exactly the same. There is also a theoretical solution available for addressing that issue.
Sure. Present.
I found something interesting.
He's showing it. What exactly did you find there?
This is that specific attachment from Sage designed for. It's probably mainly intended for the Smart Grinder Pro or other similar grinders, but specifically referring to 54 millimeters in size. Now let's take out this portafilter. By the way, and this is really, really important to me, it's really super, super important. And this is exactly the reason why I said earlier, never, ever, and at no moment during the entire brewing process, feel like you need to add more coffee. Because look at this puck, I was actually in the smiley range, you know? That's absolutely on the borderline of overdosing, to be honest.
Well, I would rather say overdosed. This way, you also have less good water distribution, and this also increases the likelihood of channeling, because the water is just pressed through at certain points depending on how streams emerge down there. Absolutely.
I would rather recommend being under the smiley, close to it but never above, because then it's too much coffee, leading to bitterness and affecting the overall quality and taste. Then you can just stick it on. Benjamin will make fun of it again. No.
No. We're taking the bowl out first, I know, right? No.
Now we simply only have the grid. If you have one, there are also bottomless portafilters that you can buy for this machine. If you have a bottomless one, then it also works with a grid. Otherwise, you really need to take it out to get underneath. So a second ago, you just started a Gind, didn't you?
I simply shook it.
Yes, you really pressed the button.
Yes, I still need to work on perfecting that.
And now you really see what I mean with the mountain on the side?
Of course, yes, absolutely. And you can see just how incredibly crowded it actually is.
The coffee is very fluffy.
Exactly. And you can see how poorly it's distributed. So shake the machine, or we can of course distort it now and then balance the whole thing. And now of course we could just use an external portafilter. If we're outside now, so you can push it back in, of course.
Mean an external tamper?
Yeah. An external temper, exactly.
Yes, one certainly could. I generally don't think that perfect tamping is that important, but also not that good. You could consider that. Now you can do some preparation, then tap here twice if needed to ensure the desired result. And once you remove it, you can start working.
However, you can also buy the previous model, then you don't have to, and you can...
I just want to show.
Just the way it is. I think it's great. So once again, Michel, I think it's absolutely wonderful, above all. Because it's an offer to everyone, I will start temping. To everyone, especially to those who already have the machine. That's really cool. And that's exactly why it's the right thing for us to do. And yet, I would criticize this clearly for anyone who is thinking about whether to buy this machine. Because with effective countermeasures, let's say, you can often find various countermeasures against conceptual accidents in many different places and situations.
I believe we can, with normal handling, if we pay a bit of attention to the temperature, we can get 60 to 70% out of the coffees we use.
Oh, that's not much.
We can probably get around 70 to 80% out with just a little bit more effort all around, I think.
But never 90 to 100. I have now trimmed this beautifully here.
Yes, that looks much better then.
You just said that.
It looks significantly better.
Better than before, yes.
Better than before. The reason it's not precise is because the temper is initially like this. Then it flips down and presses downward, making the process more complex than it seems at first glance. And because this is a plastic-based construction, it does have some metal parts incorporated in it, but it surely needs a certain amount of play for proper functioning. And if this tamper, which is actually what we want, really cuts off, that is a lines flush at the edge, then we wouldn't have this play anymore, and you would often tamper somewhere on the edge and so on. And that's why this portafilter doesn't fit perfectly, and that's why you always have a bit of annoying crumbs around the edge. And that's what I mean, it takes away roughly 5%. 5% of the potential quality of the coffee, which impacts the final taste significantly.
But we could also surround it again by simply using the external temper. Sure, that works too, and an external 54mm temper fits. Yeah, so wonderful.
That's exactly why I believe you can usually get around 80% out of the machine. Benjamin put it really nicely earlier. The simpler the coffees they use, the more it allows for tolerances, and the more you will consistently enjoy the brews you make, savoring each cup day after day.
Let's discuss it all again later and try to put it into context during the conclusion. We keep veering off track, but there are also many things, that is of course also interesting. Those are a few peculiarities needing discussion. Michel, we had some coffee, and it was more on the acidic side compared to what coffee typically offers. Our interpretation was perhaps a bit of channeling, maybe a somewhat too low brewing temperature. It's both possible. Temperature.
You need to give the machine a little bit of time to start working. You should really rinse thoroughly first and then brew. It'll definitely get significantly hotter rather than cooler. You can certainly and confidently say that for sure.
And she also makes a slight bounce with regard, so she herself is also not precise in the regard itself. It still tends, or here as well as most Sage models, to first rise slightly in temperature, then it will drop a bit, and then rise again, exhibiting a characteristic pattern. And then it's actually like this. From one reference to another, the more you get into the frequency, the more it takes off. Just to mention it again, in the Kaffeemacher protocol, we do 5 shots, Michael. And if we do not use a groundbreaking fast heat up hack that you have just invented, there's easily a difference of about 10 degrees between the first and last extraction, which can significantly affect the overall quality and consistency of the espresso shots we produce. Yeah, that's just how it is. And if you do that, if we do it, then still the first extraction, creeps up to 89, 90 degrees after 5 minutes. And then the last one is around 4.95. We see tendencies or deviations in the references suggesting some underlying factors affecting measurements. And then we also have this curve again. And the standard deviation is now more or less beneficial. It's 2 degrees on the 5 references. At least with the thermoblock, unlike with the boiler machines, you're after around 1 or 2 seconds from the moment you initially press the button, you're then within this target range. While other machines, yes, both single circuit and dual circuit types, often need a bit more time to reach the desired temperature level. This delay can affect overall efficiency. The distances are short and the temperature gets on the coffee puck quickly. This now actively promotes the standard deviation. WBC protocol, but you already mentioned it. I mean, the thing looks like a spread out rainbow. So we've got pretty much all possible temperature ranges covered there.
Well, to be fair, it's not a WPC machine. And if you disregard the grinder for 200, how much does the Sage Smart Grinder Pro cost? So the machine itself would probably be at 500 if the grinder is 200 at least.
Yes, exactly. But I mean, we also measured other machines in that price range that could do that. That's not the goal right now, but it's just not that good.
Yes, definitely. This isn't a machine for 20 guests at home all having a double espresso.
Michel, I have another question. Could you please tell me what the exact brew ratio is? Could you kindly explain to me in a bit more detail precisely what exactly it was that you have recently brewed?
I can tell you now because I have a bit more of a feeling for how much coffee is actually in there at the moment. The sieve holds slightly less than 18 grams. I'd suggest using about 17.5 grams for a consistently balanced and flavorful coffee experience each time. You can do it fairly simply. Set the portafilter on a bar, fill it, tamp it, and take it out again.
We're always talking about the double portafilter and the double basket for making coffee. Especially with this specific type of machine, because using a single basket and a portafilter, especially if you don't prepare the puck well, can be tricky. An even greater likelihood of channeling, that is, supporting channel formation. That means it's really nice when you make coffee with the machine. We always recommend that you meet with others, make coffee for others, because then you'll definitely have better coffee. And then it's the 17.5, maybe emphasizing that again, we always make shots for 2, not just because there are 2 of us, but because we generally recommend it. This simply ensures that the coffee flows out in a more evenly distributed manner.
Sure. Initially struggled a bit because when the machine indicates the perfect range, it's like an area of approximately 0.6 to 0.7 grams until the next line finally appears on the display. And then we quite often reach 18.8 grams before it, especially with the coffee we used yesterday, specifically the dry spits, before it then eventually makes its way to around 19 grams at the very top line, which we aim for. And then you're completely overdosed. So it's really not needed anymore. It's not necessarily more important when it comes to making a great cup of coffee. I can tell you now, by knowing that in your brewing it was around 18 grams, more or less. Maybe it was 18.3 grams poured into the cup along with 45 grams. That's a fairly typical drink ratio we would recommend to you in those 25 seconds. And then it was basically delicious. But there's one more topic I'd like to raise before we have the cappuccino. You have it. The possibility, I mentioned it earlier during the test, we are now in manual mode. So I tell the machine, I would like, with this wheel, you have single and double portions here. A specified amount of X coffee, which I regulate with this knob. So when you turn the knob clockwise, it dispenses more coffee, whereas turning it counterclockwise reduces the amount of coffee. But there's also an automatic mode. I find that difficult.
What's it do? What's the auto mode do?
The automatic mode detects when there's too little coffee and adjusts to ensure the perfect amount is always provided every time.
In that moment or after tamping?
After tamping, you tamper again. And you really have to visualize it like this. I tamp, I grind, the mill grinds, and then I tamp once more. The display shows low quantity, signaling an adjustment. So I go back up, and the multiplication button light blinks, flashing as an indication. And if you click on it again, it will grind it once more, and after that, you can tamp again. Then this smiley lights up. Then this bar is also green. And that doesn't make me feel the least bit happy inside. Not at all.
Oh, this is the moment where we actually need the Michel crying sticker. So what does happen now?
The most extreme example we saw was truly remarkable, as we were just below the ideal amount needed for achieving the very best possible results. Then it ground again like that, maybe for a second.
Half a gram or so? Yeah.
Yes, maybe half a gram. And then it was like that on one side. Imagine you have a mountain, you've just pressed it down, and then you grind on this side again, and then you press it together. Then you had a complete hole here, almost like a massive crater. So you saw like a beach, then comes a large rock, and then you press it firmly together again. And this represents the inconsistency we often face, the imperfection. So when you encounter this moment where the grinder indicates you have too little coffee, then either remove the coffee entirely and begin the entire process from the beginning. You can simply do that by switching the car to manual mode and back, then you can start grinding it again.
You can always choose to reopen it if you prefer to. That would work perfectly fine.
That would work if you don't remove the coffee.
Take everything out again, so remove the portafilter and so on and so forth. Stir everything well with a thin stick. Ideally, use acupuncture needles. Something like that, so not too thick, so that no big channels form again, and then you paint the rest on it, and then you tap the whole thing.
Exactly. Please don't grind again, because it makes these 0.5 grams completely irrelevant. Simply, that makes everything 30,000 times worse. Yes, I get a bit emotional there because it's like this. I feel certain things like thought of the right point, because it's absolutely wonderful to give you all the input on how much coffee should actually go into a portafilter basket. This is really important. I think it's great. But then don't just grind over it. Then it should be detected beforehand with a scale, or just say, next time I will grind a bit more into the mix for consistency. The machine can learn, but it takes a step too soon, causing occasional issues.
I'll summarize this in detail later, Michel. You'll get it all.
Cappuccino later, portafilter's cold.
Yes, I mean, the really nice thing is indeed the frothy milk mix. Yes. Let's say you just mentioned around 60, 70 or 80% espresso quality. Milk ensures we won't notice if it was 60, 70 or 80%, making it quite hard to determine the exact percentage. But things start getting critical at 50. In this sense, I would say,
done.
Let's get a cappuccino.
That was 70%, maybe 80. Only when you switch to steam mode, I would put it into a small jug or otherwise into the machine, but the drip tray is quite full, so I would now put it into the jug here, and then you'll get a lot of condensed water first. But keep on steaming continuously until you really get the maximum full steam power, and only then start frothing. That's when it really gets to be fun. Power there. And then the whipping. It truly needs an abundance of time and very careful love. So you have this, okay, rolling phase, but eventually and ultimately you just have a really slow and truly steady heating process, which is essential. I'll just move over to the other side. I think you'll be able to see it a bit better from Larissa's perspective. The rolling phase, that's good. The milk is circulating in the pitcher, but the heating, if you imagine, I think I've been talking for 30 seconds already, and I'm not even at body temperature yet. And the milk at the beginning was maybe 12 degrees, 13 degrees, so it wasn't quite 6 degrees fridge temperature. So right now I might be around 40. And then you can roll really nicely here. There's an awesome mix result. It's definitely super cool, but it takes 50. Now it goes relatively fast, 55. 60. And it is certainly possible to obtain a truly awesome and outstanding judgment, absolutely achievable if you put in the effort. Okay, Ben, here is your cappuccino.
Thanks for the lovely swan.
Milk foam is great. Takes longer, but has enough pressure. Tastes delicious. Sure, fine. Apparently not the first time. It takes a bit of practice, but it works.
Yes, that works just fine. What was the time now, or what is our current measurement time?
66 seconds.
So it takes just over 1 minute to bring the cold water to the right temperature. This is kind of the reference range. I mean, we now know of 2 circles. We've often been around 30, 40 seconds, 50 seconds. With faster dual boilers, we're sometimes at 20, 25.
Or it might be a bit longer. I think that's also not really an issue, but it's fine. You just need a little bit of extra time. And now I've frothed a double portion. If you're frothing a single portion, you'll need a bit less time. I find the supplied jug a bit annoying in terms of volume because it has 450 milliliters, which is actually a bit too small for a double serving and a bit too big for a single serving. This makes it inconvenient when trying to prepare the perfect amount. Because otherwise, the jugs generally hold around 600 for a double serving and etwa 350 for a single serving. It's neither fish nor fowl, or how does the saying go?
Yes, and I'd also like to contribute something positive here. Ah, yes, nice, great.
Really nice.
We recently tested a few single boilers again. Essentially, this thermoblock is also a single boiler system because you have to heat up and cool down that one heating element, and the thermoblock does that faster than many single boilers. You get back up and down quicker as it's not as static, allowing for smoother and more efficient performance. I'd say in terms of thermal stability. You can quickly bring it down again to the desired temperature, essential for frothing and preparing milk-based drinks. I'd say it makes things significantly easier. You get to your goal faster, and after brewing your coffee, you can quickly steam the milk after a short wait. And once the milk is steamed, rinse it down a bit and then basically make the next shot. There are hardly any waiting times, except the natural ones that you would also have at home anyway. So you hand over the coffee, ask how it tastes, and then make the next one. And I would say that this is better than with the single circuit machines. Yes, and this is also better here now. I would also say that the machine, even though it is slow, has its strengths in that area. Speaking of strengths, the included items and that milk jug. You've got more material to mention and discuss, providing useful information for our viewers. Once again, we have to clean up here.
Exactly, cleaning program, pretty simple. You turn the machine off completely. You press the 3 buttons over here simultaneously, and then you'll enter the cleaning program. The machine does that automatically. There are also Sage cleaning tablets you can use for this. Usually, for 700 francs, you don't get a cleaning program with a coffee machine. Now, I want to move on and address a new topic, which is all about the range of features and functionalities this machine offers.
You talk about the razor every time you mention a Sage machine.
Yeah, but I'm feeling quite dumb. I think we've already, if you've watched any Sage videos from us before, this specific razor, we've often ranted about it in those videos. I find it even more stupid being here, honestly.
I would actually call that a spatula.
Yes, I would simply refer to him as being known by the nickname Razor.
The razor's job is to remove enough coffee grounds from the portafilter so it isn't overfilled, ensuring smooth brewing and great coffee. Scraping it off like that means you lose a bit of coffee grounds each time. You don't have to weigh much, that's the idea. The idea here again is that the machine basically does it for you, and everything else will just be scraped off. And if the coffee level is clearly below the razor, then you've used too little with other Sage models. But you do have an integrated feature for that.
Exactly. And right now, I will show you 2 detailed examples of why this particular thing shouldn't be included with this specific machine at all, because it definitely doesn't make any sense for it to be there. Because the point here is essentially to take away the excess coffee. Okay. I'll start grinding in here right now. 13 seconds, roughly speaking.
18 grams.
For 18 grams. So, and now I would like to use this one. So if I now pull out the portafilter, can you see what happens?
Oh, he's already gone and shaved it. He's the one, I mean, right? Everything's already fallen down. So,
and now I'll give you the very first example. So let's just assume for a moment.
Do it on the table, then we'll have a mess here so you can really see it. Yeah, man.
Okay, let's say I go ahead and use this now, which is pretty ridiculous, but just to show you how it works, I put this here to demonstrate. Spackle that on. Man, dude, that's just not okay.
Erase a bit more now.
That's quite long though.
Yeah, there's still something on top.
Fine, remove it now.
Well, that's certainly plenty for now. We could also discuss further. How about we just forget it and go ahead and wrap up the video?
Can I show you something about it? When I do the form grinding, and now tamp, look what the machine says now. This amount is way too little, but really why?
Whoa! You completely messed everything up beyond recognition. Good. Or is it meant that you only start after the tamp?
Yeah, that's not how it's fine.
Why did I ask that?
Now temp.
Good, the cappuccino is now 80%.
Now it's the smiley. All right.
Cool.
Okay, now I'll take the razor.
Yeah, I think the point is clear. Michel, we and you, we have a point there, I believe. I think we're doing...
Okay, I still get a smile.
I think if you have any ideas about what we could do with the razor or how to use it properly, please let us know because we're really eager to hear your suggestions. Especially with the Sage Barista Express Impress, we would love your thoughts. Comment below. Please share all your thoughts in the comments below about our performance.
Let's go ahead and wrap things up. I think you expressed it nicely at the beginning. It's like a warm hug taking a step towards a portafilter. I'd be comfortable for a while, but eventually I'd want more from my coffee, maybe a deeper flavor or robust aroma to enhance the experience.
I think it's just an automatic support the wrong time. Honestly, I don't know if I want to be supported like this right now. When preparing, yes, when you are actually preparing. At this very specific point, I truly believe there are numerous ways to create more accessible portafilter espresso machines. And I genuinely believe there are a multitude of ways to support and significantly simplify the overall preparation process. But I significantly question whether it actually makes sense in this situation, especially when I'm incorporating weaknesses into the machine that I can easily improve with just a bit of hands-on intervention. The distribution of coffee grounds isn't improving at all now, is it? Any of you who level the coffee grounds at home and then tamp it yourself will most certainly do a better job than the automation process can manage here. Automation really makes sense in situations where it simplifies things and brings significantly more consistency. Here, just the opposite happens. That's precisely why I don't consider it a very clever step, which could potentially enable people to more easily make a delicious and satisfying espresso at home without much effort. You can honestly do this better yourself. The inconsistency in preparation means that with the grind setting, you're constantly struggling because there is no uniformity, which affects the overall quality of your espresso. We adjust the grind level finer or coarser, which we also cover in the e-learning course, if the coffee runs too fast or too slow. But if I get the signal from the machine by changing resistance, oh, now I was 23, I should actually fine-tune. Next time I'll fine-tune. He's switching gears again here. You're lost, you're lost. That means, from my perspective, it's totally counterproductive. So it's the opposite of what the machine aims to achieve. I don't think it's meant to be a helping hand. Instead, I believe it's actually more of a measure to wean off certain behaviors. I don't think automation here will really bring you any closer to mastering the art of making a truly perfect espresso, which requires dedication and skill.
In the way that it is inconsistent, it actually remains consistent.
You know that you know nothing.
You never know what you don't know, but the pile is always slanted. You slant, you always tap a slanted pile.
Michel, could you tilt it a bit more now, please? It will then be aligned correctly and balanced.
At least that. The pile is always roughly in the same direction.
So, once again, who's buying the machine is really my question, and who would I recommend the machine to? I would always recommend the previous model or the Sage Barista Pro if I stick with the Sage world. And even when I look both to my left and right, I really have to admit, I get both the mill and the machine for the exact same price arrangement as the Varia VS3 DeLonghi Didica. Have fun! Saved precisely 150. And I could come up with even more ideas and suggestions. And that's why I truly believe you've now detailed so very many measures to actually bypass and enhance simplification efforts. So much so that Sage itself offers a range of other kinds of machines that
can do more.
I apologize, I might be feeling a bit too negative today. But maybe you think I'm on the right track with all of my thoughts, or perhaps you feel that Michel has managed to find the perfect balance in giving detailed feedback on the machine's overall performance. That's our main claim. We don't have to agree on everything. We're providing a broad spectrum of opinions. And you're especially invited to share with us how you find the machine. Because maybe you're totally satisfied, maybe you say, hey, for me, this is just right. If you think I'm exaggerating, please do mention that in the comments below. And if you think that's just as right. But I have one more important question.
I also have an email tutorial. You haven't been to a home barista course with us for a long time. Maybe then it would be easier for you.
I have another point we haven't discussed. Namely, I would like to conduct a small empirical study. It goes like this. Maybe you have just got the machine. Then please write in the comments how it works for you. Maybe you've had it for a year or two. Also let us know in the comments how it works. And most importantly, write in the comments whether you have the machine. It's not even 3 years old. But do write in the comments if you have a Sage Espresso machine that has worked for more than 3 years. I'd absolutely love to see that. I'd really love to hear about that, because I keep hearing that there are problems with this, and I think it's something that definitely needs to be discussed when it comes to value. That there are always also documented challenges that the temperature suddenly won't rise anymore. I think that definitely needs to be discussed too. Unfortunately, we can't discuss it here because we have a brand new machine with which we made some exceptionally good espresso. We had to cheat a bit and put in significant effort, working really quite hard. Partly humidify the room, but eventually it worked well. And with that, we finally say goodbye for now. We'll see you in the coming weeks. Take care of yourselves. And if you want to learn more about the Sage Barista Express Impress and how to perfectly set it up, with the help of the man, not me, then make sure to sign up right away for the mailing list for our e-learning course. Goodbye and see you soon.